My teacher sexually harassed me and I didn't know. Let's call this teacher Mr. Fitz. He taught history and history was my favorite class ever since I was younger. Mr. Fitz was a pretty good looking guy, I'm not gonna lie. But I didn't say anything because he was like in his 30s and we were all teenagers in high school. Freshmen to be exact. I was 14 around the time that this had happened. One day, Mr. Fitz handed me back a test paper, and I got a really good grade on it. The highest grade in the class, to be exact. He winked at me after handing me my paper, but I didn't pay any attention to it. I just thought he was being friendly. Then, the special treatment began, or known as, now that I know, grooming. It started with the snacks, and the constant higher scores than everybody else, pointing out that I was best student in class, etc. A lot of praise as well. Other students were jealous. Other students praised me. Some students even thought he liked me and I declined and felt it was inappropriate. But boy, were they right. Mr. Fitz asked me to stay after school and you will not believe what happened next. Come back for part 2. So Mr. Fitz had asked me to stay after school to discuss my grades and stuff. I was a little confused because he gave me good grades. Why would we need to discuss my grades? I had the highest grade in all of his classes. But I went anyways. I sat down on my usual seat and I asked him what the issue was. He said nothing, I just wanted to see how you were doing. I was like, oh okay, but can we make it quick? I have to be home by a certain time. He said yeah, that's fine, and he proceeded to sit next to me. We started talking about my other classes and how my grades were, which they were perfectly fine. It was just small talk. He told me how much of a good student I was and that I was his favorite, and he squeezed my shoulder. He gave me this weird look and it made me really uncomfortable. I brushed his hand off my shoulder and we continued to talk. You're a good kid. I just wanted to let you know that. He proceeded to say as he squeezed my leg. I got up and thanked him, and then I left the room. I went back home and I was really confused, but I just brushed it off. I went to school the next day and he asked me to stay after school again. And you will not believe what happened. Come back for part 3. I asked him if there's a problem because this is the second time that he's asked me to stay after school. He says no, but I have a question for you. I say, okay, what is it? I pull out my phone and record, because I felt really uncomfortable and had a weird feeling about this. He basically asked me out to be his girlfriend. He said if I was his girlfriend, he would give me good grades, and I wouldn't have to do schoolwork or tests or anything like that, and that I would also get paid. Don't you have a wife? I said. He said that doesn't matter and no one needs to know. I ran out of the classroom and panicked. I didn't really know what to do. I went to my guidance counselor and I showed her the recording. I told her the situation made me feel really uncomfortable. She told me that I was being groomed and that this is highly inappropriate for a teacher and this will immediately be resolved. I said okay and thank you. The next day I went to school, he was fired. We had a substitute for the time being and she was really nice and she didn't do anything appropriate to me this time. So lesson be learned, if you ever feel uncomfortable in a situation like this, especially when you're speaking to the higher ups, always record the situations and report it. Follow for more story time. There was a murderer in my classroom and I had no idea. There was this kid in the back of the classroom, let's call him Luke. People always picked on him and made fun of him, but I never did. I tried my best to stick up for him, but people wouldn't listen all the time. 3 groups specifically picked on him. The popular girls consisting of Olivia, Mackenzie, and Omaria. The jocks, only 2 kids, Nathaniel and Jason, picked on him. And the dance team group. Trinity, Sophia, and Johnny's picked on him regularly. Olivia and Jason were dating, so people didn't really focus on the fact that they were bullies, more so that they were a cute couple. One day during lunch, Jason pushed him against the wall after he tried to defend himself. You'll regret this, Luke said. Jason backed up surprisingly and the school day went on. Luke did not give a good vibe from this afterwards. He was very cold and emotionally distant. I was a little concerned and wanted to ask if he was okay, but I just left him alone. Then I went to school the next day and you will not believe what happened. Come back for part 2. I was the only one who noticed Luke was absent, but also Olivia was. Olivia took pride and joy in school. It was important for her, so it was weird how she missed it. Some people said she was on a trip to Miami, but I didn't believe it. And then the vice principal walked in. You will not believe what happened. He says there's an investigation going on of Luke being missing, and says if anybody knows anything, please tell us. Jason looks nervous, but I don't know why. A couple days later, it turns out Olivia was arrested for the brutal murder of Luke. Lesson learned, never trust anybody. Follow for more. He was perfect, and I saw a ring in his drawer, but apparently it wasn't for me. This is probably one of the worst ways to get cheated on, at least in my experience. So I met this guy, let's call him Dan. Dan was perfect. We were astrologically compatible as he was an Aries and I was a Gemini. We thought alike and got along so well. He was so romantic and such a huge flirt. He used to be a player but promised to commit to me after trying to get with me for so long. Probably 3 weeks, I would say. We've been dating about a year and everything's just been perfect. He would take me out on dates weekly. buy me gifts every 2 weeks. We took our time alone as he spent time with the bros about twice a week. Our relationship was healthy. One day, I was putting away laundry in one of his nightstands. He likes his boxers in his nightstand specifically, I don't know why. And I found a ring! It was one of the prettiest rings I've ever seen, and it was totally meant for me. Now I just had to keep it a secret and wait for him to propose. But things took a left from here on out. Come back for part 2. He stopped taking me on dates, and it became only one every 2 weeks, then once a month. Then, not at all. He started hanging out with his bros more and more and more, at least 5 times a week for several hours. I asked him why he was acting so weird, and he questioned me. I told him, you're spending so much time with the bros that you're giving me too much personal space. He apologized and said him and the bros were planning out something. I told him it's okay and walked away. It must have been for the proposal. One night I woke up while me and Dan were sleeping, and I had a weird urge to check his phone. There was a message with their contact name with a heart, and it said, I miss you. I got mad, but then calmed down and went back to bed. The next morning I called my mom about the situation, and she seemed nonchalant. She told me I was being clingy and annoying. This wasn't normal. She usually never acted like this, and she was pretty overprotective of me when it came to my heart. I hung up the phone and went back to bed. He went out the next day with his bros again and walked out without saying I love you. But I had the perfect plan to catch him. You will not believe what happened. Come back for part 3. So my plan was to follow him to wherever he was going and to stalk him. I wanted to see who this person was. So I got into my car and I started to drive after him. I was about 5 cars behind, so he didn't see me at all whatsoever. I also put lashes on my car for a better disguise because he knew I hate lashes on cars. Midway, my mother called me and apologized about yesterday. She claimed that she was just having trouble with my father. I said it was okay. I told her about my plan and she said it was a wonderful idea. So I ended up at a cafe and parked 3 cars away from his. I watched him go into the cafe to meet up with my dad. They hugged and kissed. My boyfriend and father kissed. I ran out the car and smacked him. Are you serious? How could you do this to me? He looked confused and shocked. And you're supposed to be my dad, and you're married to mom. Both of them and left. I packed my bags and went to a hotel. Dan tried to apologize and my father, but I left Dan and never spoke to my father or him again. I now live with my mother in a small apartment. Always trust her instinct. Thanks for watching and follow for more. My fiance cheated on me 3 days before my wedding with the worst person possible. So I met Jackson a few years ago. Me and him were very compatible, and when he proposed, I was so happy. I was dreaming of how many kids we'd have in our dream home and how many dogs we would buy. He treated me wonderfully. He was everything I dreamed of. But one day he started acting funny. He stopped doing stuff with me regularly, if you know what I mean. Stopped flirting with me, just distancing. He would leave the house regularly to go hang with his friends, but I didn't believe it. For 10 hours a day? No way. One day, his phone was buzzing like crazy while we were watching a movie, and I looked at his phone. It was Paul, and it said, we're still down for tonight, right? I asked him why Paul was telling him to go out so late, and he said he was helping plan the wedding. I didn't believe it. One day, while Jackson was sleeping, I put an app in his phone that would let me hear phone calls. Whenever Paul would call, I would hear the convo. One day, Paul called and Jackson left the room, and I was listening on the other end. This voice sounded oddly familiar, and then it hit me. You will not believe who answered. Come back for part 2. Is this Amelia? No, she wouldn't do that to me. She's been my best friend ever since we were 5 and maid of honor. Maybe it's Monet. They sound an awful lot alike, and Monet never trusted Amelia. They were flirting and talking on the phone, and they said they were going to be at Olive Garden to talk more, so I knew where to go. He said goodbye and that he loved me before he left. I simply ignored him. 20 minutes later, I drove to Olive Garden and saw his car there. I didn't see Amelia's car though, so it must be Monet. I walked up to the waiter and asked if she saw my husband after I showed a picture to her. She said yes, I actually sat them down 20 minutes ago, and guided me to them. It was Amelia and Jackson. Screamed at the both of them and poured their drinks and food on them. I didn't care if I caused a scene. She was supposed to be my best friend, and him my future husband. People stared at me and gasped. I ran out of Olive Garden, packed some essentials, and went to a hotel. The wedding was called off and I never talked to him again. They both tried to apologize to me several times, but I wasn't having it. Now I live in New York alone, and I haven't been in a relationship since. Follow for more story times. I accidentally murdered my cousin's baby. I had a cousin, let's call her Evie. Evie was a few months older than me. Around this time we were about 12 to 13. We were pretty close, so we hung out regularly. She was raised by parents who didn't care about what she did or who she talked to. She would steal from stores regularly, like a lot. Steal from me sometimes, steal my mother's rabbits, buy condoms, and bring grown men into the house. I wasn't sure what they did, but the door was closed and I was downstairs at the time. One day, I was supposed to go to Casey's house, but Evie just had to come over. So I had to bring her along. She had met Casey and she was being really touchy with him. I had a crush on him for a few years, and she knew this. My friend drew me a drawing of me and Casey, and she saw it and called it cute. I hated how touchy she was being with him, and Casey was uncomfortable as well. After we were done hanging, I went back to my house, and she left back to her house. She left her bag. So like the jealous person I was, I went through it and found a condom. I took a picture of it and sent it to Casey. He agreed that he wouldn't talk to her anymore. I also poked holes in the condom hoping she would get an STD or get pregnant. And you will not believe what happened next. So we met up one day and we were at a cookout at my family's house. She brought a couple of her friends and her friends started making fun of me. She pushed me down on the ground. Me and her started physically fighting. She managed to push me down again. While her and her delinquent friends were laughing, thinking she defeated me, I managed to grab a wrench. "Hey Evie, take this!" She looked back at me and got a wrench to her nose. She fell down and fainted. Her friends started screaming and she was bleeding from her nose a lot. She also started bleeding from another place, but we couldn't find the area. An ambulance was called and she was rushed to the hospital. Turns out she was bleeding from her vaginal area and she had a miscarriage. Remember that time I poked holes in her condom? Yeah. She ended up pregnant because of me and then I killed her baby. It was an accident though, it wasn't intentional, and I didn't even know she was pregnant. But I didn't feel bad because she was an a-hole to me. She doesn't know it was me that was the cause of her pregnancy till this day. Me and her haven't spoken and I'm currently 15 years old. Moral of the story is karma is a bee no matter what and always treat people kindly. Follow for more story times. This girl was obsessed with me and my biggest hater. So it was the beginning of my senior year and I met this girl, let's call her Victoria. We first met when I was talking to the teacher and she said, "New here, right?" And I was like, yeah. I don't know why, but I got a weird feeling from her and she gave me creepy vibes. One day I was talking to another friend and she said hi and I said hi back. She was pretty nice and friendly around this time, so maybe I was wrong, but I still had a hunch. We were both Capricorns and pretty artistic. We both loved fashion, drawing, singing, etc., etc. We got excited and she wrapped her arm around mine and we started walking, which made me pretty uncomfortable. She complimented my outfit as well and we became acquainted from there on out. Then she started getting more comfortable with me, a little too comfortable. She was very demanding at the time. She would always brag about how much money she had and stuff. One time she mentioned bidding $1,000 over ice cream with her brother and something, and she won. Then she started becoming more and more critical and judgmental and mean. You will not believe what happened next. Come back for part 2. She started doing this thing where she would creepily stare at me constantly, like just stare me down. I remember walking and she just stood there and stared at me while waiting for me. I said hi and then she just walked away. One day I was walking to class in this really cute outfit. I made a left down the hall and she literally stared at me walking down the hallway and I was confused. It was kind of creepy and stalkerish. She told me, "Why are you wearing that?" And I said, "Because I can." "Cause who the freak are you, my mother?" Then we went to lunch. While I was literally putting oil on my sandwich, she was rushing me. I gave her a glare and said she's really impatient. She said, "I know." After that, she asked me to buy some snacks and I said no, cause girl, you can afford $1,000 over some damn ice cream but not no $1 chips? She must have been lying then. From there on out, I decided to ignore her as her karma because she kept bothering me. It made her so mad. One day she stared at me and I told her to stop and she just looked away. After that, she attempted to bully me and talk about me 24/7, but I ignored her. I knew my worth and I don't need someone with negative energy like that in my life. After that, she just stared at me 24/7 and everyone around me noticed. Always know your self-worth and cut those out of negative energy. My aunt married a toxic manipulator, cultural appropriator, and abusive white man. She has been divorced for over 10 years now and she met this guy, we'll call him Joe. Joe and her were friends for a while and she met him Halloween of 2020. She felt like she had to marry him because she's 50 and plus size, so he would be the only one to love her, and so she did. I first met him on Christmas Eve. When he walked into the door, I was shocked. He was wearing a Halloween Indian chief costume, which the name in itself is offensive for one. He was wearing a Chiefs jersey and fake moccasins as well. I automatically didn't like him. My aunt is full Native American and he yells and screams at her constantly, but he thinks he can get away with it because he claims his great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. He would say horrible things like, "You're fat, so no one would ever love you but me. You're no longer allowed to be Native American because I'm white." He claimed he was going to leave the Mormon church and it would have been her fault. Just gaslighted and manipulated her. Then he realized it wasn't going to work on her anymore, so he moved on to me, and you will not believe what he said. Come back for part 2. Here's some of the things that he said to me. "You are too much of a for my liking. Go bleach your skin. Being white is acceptable, and it offends me that you aren't. No man loves an Indian. Go eat a salad, fat loser, You are your biggest parent's mistake because you are Native American." I confronted him about this and everyone pinned it on me and called me the bad guy because I didn't like him being racist. I plan on moving to Florida, but he claims he had to go with me because he believed I had to have a white man control me. He also thinks being Native American is sinful. My grandmother is also racist and believes I'm an abuser for saying no to a white man. They both have similar points of views and it's embarrassing, honestly. I'm moving in a couple of weeks, but I still see him at family events. Lesson be learned, don't be racist, don't marry a racist, and don't tolerate this type of negativity in your home. Follow for more story times. She broke my leg over a boy. So I met this girl at the start of high school. Let's call her Sarah. She introduced herself to me and she seemed confident, like she had a high sense of self-entitlement. Like she was above me. For nearly 3 years, she would push me around and say it was a joke. She would call me things like, "You're a slut. You're so useless. You should die," honestly speaking. And then she'd apologize a day after. It was alright, but the apology seemed disingenuous. She would patronize my best friend for talking to her ex, which was none of her business anyways. She was always dating a boy and she acted like a pick-me girl. She would do things like asking the boys to wear their hoodies, hat, anything they'd wear, and to play football with them. She also considered herself one of the boys, and she always ended her relationships after about a week. Then, my life started to lighten up. I had met this boy, let's call him Nathan. Nathan was actually Sarah's best friend, and she had introduced us. But boy, you will not believe what happened next. Come back for part 2. Nathan was the sweetest guy ever and would always bring me flowers whenever I was alone. His mother and grandmother were sweet as well. They ended up loving me so much that they brought me gifts a lot too. I was so grateful and happy that this had happened. I've never had this happen to me before, but this never happened for Sarah either, which is why she was jealous and spiteful about it. She thought it was a joke at first, but then she realized it wasn't. She said, "Hell no," and came to me straight away. This happened about a month and a half before prom, mind you. We were playing a game of jump rope at the park with like 5 others, including my boyfriend. She then picked up this really big rope when we were taking a break and whipped my leg. Everyone saw it and I was in horrible pain. I couldn't get up or move, and no one had cars, so an ambulance had to be called and I was taken to the hospital. I described what happened to the doctor and they recommended that we get some scans. The doctors came back and told me that my leg was broken, sadly. I was so furious. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to break my leg out of jealousy. And then what happened afterwards is ridiculous, and you would not believe what happens. Come back for part 3. She had the audacity to ask out my boyfriend twice after the incident. My leg finally healed up 1 week before prom and I had a good time. After, the whole school was still turned on her, and now she keeps spamming me and my friends, asking if she can have my social medias. She tried reaching out to me, but I want her to leave my life. I don't know what else I could do. I did stuff with my cousin, and now I might be pregnant. So I have this cousin, let's call him Isaiah. I met him when I was 5 years old and we were never separated at the hip. My mom always made jokes about us getting married, and we both agreed and said we would someday. But we never knew what it actually meant. From there on out, we would always play house and pretend to be a married couple. Then, as we went to elementary school, people thought we were a couple, but I brushed it off and we explained we were cousins. Then, I started feeling butterflies whenever I looked at him and I couldn't really explain it. It was like it was love, but I didn't think it was because he was my cousin. And that would be weird. Then, when we went to high school, he got hotter. He had a 6-pack, the perfect haircut, and his gorgeous emerald eyes always stood out. He was a quarterback on the football team and everyone's dream boy. Girls were jealous I was near him, and I found it funny yet empowering. He started going to parties regularly and doing drugs, but I didn't participate. One day, he came by and he suggested that we drink. He poured vodka and handed me it. I drank it out of pressure. Then I felt dizzy and tired. I passed out, and you won't believe what happened next. Come back for part 2. I woke up confused and woke Isaiah up. I asked him what happened and he said we had blank. I freaked out and he said it's fine. I thought otherwise and told him to get out of the room. He had to have drugged me because I don't remember anything and you don't just pass out from vodka. I took an emergency drug test and it came out positive. I was so mad and I screamed at him about it. I told him that this wasn't consensual and considered blank, and that he's lucky I'm not reporting him. 6 days later, I started puking and had headaches. I think I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. Should I take a test? And if I take a test, should I abort it? What do I do? Please help me. Give advice in the comments down below and follow for more story times. My mom made my sexual violence about her and lied. So here's the backstory. My mom was emotionally and physically abusive to me. She always hated me growing up. My earliest memory that supports this claim is she beat me with a hairbrush when I was 4, almost 5. She didn't care for me as well. One time I got a UTI from being by a little girl who was older than me and babysat me. I began urinating blood, and so my grandmother decided to take me in after this happened. But sadly, she passed away from cancer and I had to live with my mother again. I entered high school and met this guy, let's call him Jonathan. It was 4th period history. I was his tutor. He used to sit behind me and tickle me or touch my hair. This led to flirting, and just like that, we started dating. Everything was fine at first, but then things turned left. He kept trying to push me away, saying we can't post our status on Facebook. Basically stuff like us dating a secret. I understand he was a cheater because I didn't have enough dating experience to naturally pick up the red flags. And I've never looked into stuff like that. He and I ended up dating for 3 years, and you could imagine that it was hell for me. When I was 18, I wanted to run away to live with him. And you will not believe what happened next. Come back for part 2. My parents caught me and made me come back home. My mother said she would call the cops and tell them I had drugs on me, which I didn't. So I ended up coming back for the sake of me and my boyfriend at the time. As soon as I got home, she physically abused me, pulling my hair and punching me. She took my phone, which I paid for with my job, and told me I had to go to the college that she chose, as well as break up with my boyfriend. So I did. I ended up majoring in nursing and then switched to other majors 1,000 times. I started seeing him again while I was attending, and I told my parents that we were together again since I never really stopped loving him. Things started to get sketchy with him. Some girl accused him of blank, which I felt was really screwed up. I confronted him about it, and he didn't take it the right way. Long story short, I ended up being blanked by him as well. It was at his house. I was so hurt and betrayed. I was doubting the girl when in reality she was right the whole time. He began taking my birth control and flushing it down the toilet, trying to get me pregnant. Which, he ended up successfully doing it, but thankfully I miscarried. I was too scared to leave or face my mom. He told me I had to move in with him to pay rent, and you will not believe what happened next. Come back for part 3. As I went to tell my parents I plan on moving out, my mom told me I couldn't because my boyfriend, her. Which was a lie, but I broke up with him anyways for the benefit of my mental health and physical health. He denied blanking me, yet I still went to court over my encounter with him anyways. In court, they threw my mother's case out, but they accepted a restraining order from me and almost imprisoned him. I didn't press any charges though, and I kept the restraining order because my mother forced me to. Still, till this day, she forces everyone to believe my ex only victimized her and tells her I'm too weak to protect her. Flash forward, I'm now in a healthy marriage and away from my mother. Good things will always come. Follow for more story times.